You're listening to the Blind Tiger Record Club podcast, where we champion music of all genres, and we believe vinyl is king.
Vinyl is king.
Welcome back to the Blind Tiger Record Club on air. We are so excited to be back with everyone again for another discussion on some excellent new albums that just released on vinyl. If you missed our last show, you can listen to that episode at lightning100.com/blindtiger, or you can head to your favorite podcast platform and check out that episode and many, many more, including some great artist interviews from last season. There are 4 seasons of shows like the one you will hear tonight. The podcast is available on most podcast platforms. I'm David Williams, and I'm here with Rudy Newman.
Hey, everybody.
And Kevin Lee.
Hey, how are we?
Great to be back with you guys.
Great to be here.
If you enjoy this show, the best way you can support us is by becoming a club member. At Blind Tiger Record Club, we curate 4 styles for our members each month: singer-songwriter, rock and alternative, jazz, soul and blues, and classics. If you have not made the format leap to vinyl, it's not a problem. We have everything you need to get started. Even if you do not listen to vinyl, this show is designed to be a discovery tool for new music. So even if all you do is stream, this show should expose you to some new music and hopefully some interesting information about the creators of the music. You really should, however, consider vinyl. It's a far more superior format, and we believe it will really enhance your enjoyment and engagement of the music in general. Just go to blindtigerrecordclub.com, and you can see our membership details laid out with easy-to-read instructions and descriptions. You'll also see our current records of the month, as well as record players and other accessories. Tonight, we are discussing the May Spotlight album and 4 new store editions. The Spotlight album is simply an album that we did not put in our membership program, but nevertheless, it's an album that we think you should not miss. Our Spotlight album for May is Dinosaur Jr.'s Sweep into Space. We'll also be discussing David Gray's new release, Skellig, the White Lion's reissue of the band's greatest hits album, The Best of White Lion. We will talk about a really unique album that just released from collaborators Maranda Lambert, Jack Ingram, and John Randall called the Marfa Tapes. And the last album we will hit today is the newest release by Greta Van Fleet, The Battle at Garden's Gate. Well, all right, let's get to today's show. Let's drop the needle and take a quick listen to the Blind Tiger Record Club's May Spotlight album and new store editions.
Sometimes we sway, couldn't have it any other way. Now it happened, nobody's happy with it, everybody's living through it. Must admit I get into it. Don't make it harder, hand me a hand. No time, no rain. Where is the garden? And when do we move? Love how you move with me.
So on March 3rd, Dinosaur Jr. released the band's 12th studio album, Sweep It Into Space, on Jaguar Records.
Jaguar.
Jaguar.
Yeah.
This label is based out of Bloomington, Indiana. It's a pretty respected alternative label. They
Like
actually
indie rock.
Yeah,
to the fullest. Yeah.
They signed Justin Vernon's Bon Iver in 2007, and that kind of really helped them initiate their first bit of label growth. And since then, they've signed acts like Foxygen, Okerville, River, Sharon Van Eaton.
Yep.
There's many, many more. I think you're absolutely right. They're really, really dominant in like kind of the indie rock space. But, you know, they've established themselves now as a really good home for bands like that.
Yep.
And so I think it's a great place for Dinosaur Jr., who's been there since their 2009 release, Farm. You know, this band started as a 3-piece. You've got Jay Massis on guitars and vocals. He's also the principal songwriter. There was Lou Barlow on bass, and he just goes by Murph on drums.
Yeah.
The band released their first album in 1985, but it was really the early 90s when the band began to gain momentum. They signed to Sire Records and released their major label debut in 1991, which was an album called Green Mind. They're not grunge, but it was really, really early alternative, like almost before we were really talking about alternative music on a regular basis. That's when they kind of...
The Nirvanas weren't quite like super popular.
Well, as a
at the
matter of
time.
fact, when they were supporting that album, Green Mind,
Yeah.
Nirvana was one of the support acts on that tour. Now,
Supporting act
not
for Dinosaur Jr.
Yeah. Well, Barlow left the band right before they signed the Sire. He would go on to form bands like Sebadoh and Folk Implosion. Jay Mascis, he ended up filling the band with players that were primarily their role was touring.
Because he can record all parts by himself.
And so in 1992, the band toured with Jesus and Mary Chain and My Bloody Valentine and Blur. So that's kind of like when you think back on the landscape of early alternative music and rock going into 91, 92, really the birth of grunge. I mean, that's when this band was just taking off.
Yep.
You know, from the radio and touring landscape, it was really kind of all going grunge and really hard indie alternative. And the band went back in the studio right during this time to record Where You've Been in 1993. This album produced the band's first radio hit, which was Start Choppin'. That song went number 3 on modern rock radio, and it was top 20 in the UK. The album was pretty much on a lot of critic lists at the end of the year as one of the top alternative albums of that year. And then again, another one of the members left, Murph, after touring that album, and that now Mascis is the sole remaining original member, but he didn't stop recording and pretty much recorded them all himself. Yeah. So in 1994, they released an album called Without a Sound. It produced another solid alternative single. It's the song Feel the Pain. It went number 4 on modern rock and number 25 in the UK.
Arguably their most recognizable hit.
The band wouldn't release another album until 1997, this time on Reprise Records. And soon after that, he retired the band's name and opted to start releasing either solo albums, or he went out for a while as Jay Mascis and the Fog. He had a band called Witch. But then the band got back together in 2005, and it was the original lineup, and they have stayed together ever since. So it's kind of crazy, but they've been together longer since they've reunited than they were originally when they had all their big hits on the major labels. But I think it's important to know that history to understand the specific kind of lineage tied to this band as you listen to this new album.
Yeah.
The first single off this album was released in February with a video in March. It's a song, I Ran Away.
I'm never sure whose side to take, never sure when I'm awake. There's a difference, make it 3. If I could change, I would agree. There's a section out of reach, little things I'd like to keep. Rattles in your head aside, I'd expect another time. I ran away, I gave it up today. Who could I blame? It can't be true. I ran away, I stopped and then I faced. That's where I stayed away from you.
Almost every album, if not all of them, were produced by Jay Mascis for, literally the entire Dinosaur Jr. catalog.
Yeah.
When I mentioned that the other 2 members, Barlow and Murphy, left the band, what I didn't say was that Mascis recorded almost all the parts for really all of the biggest records. So all those hits, all those albums that they did on the major labels, he would replace the players, like I said, for touring, but not for the studio, and then he would play
everything.
Most of the things.
Drums. He actually started out as a drummer in a band with Lou Barlow before they did Dinosaur Jr. So he was, historically he was a drummer, so he had no problem recording all those parts. Also guitar, also most vocals except for the background vocals.
And bass.
And he would play bass.
Yeah, that was the only thing. I think that's the only. If you look, on credits on those albums, you'll see all these engineers and mix guys and the bass player.
Yeah.
And then everything else is Mascis.
Jay Mascis.
On this album, there's no surprise, but he's back producing.
Yep. With some help.
But the twist is that this time he brought in Kurt Vile to co-produce. And he plays some of the guitar parts as well. Big fan of Kurt Vile on this podcast.
We featured him in the club.
Yeah. He's a great artist, and it was just fun to hear him on the.
Yeah.
I mean, I can hear, even though he doesn't.
Yeah.
He kind of only puts textures in
Yep.
here
Little
or there,
parts.
but I could tell
Yeah.
when I was like, that's kind of a.
Or if there was
Kurt
some
Weill moment.
influence in
Yeah,
there.
and consequently, this album to me is one of the most catchy albums that they've done in a while. I mean, I really think even since the band's reunion, this is probably one of the most song-friendly albums that they've put out.
Pretty sonically, yeah.
Well,
Perfect.
They've been together now longer in the 21st century and made more albums than they did in the first go-around. So it seems like Mascis and Barlow have really, that was where a lot of the tension was,
Between
originally
them.
was between them. And it seems like they've kind of figured it out and really been able to kind of put all that behind them. And they're making some good music.
Yeah.
This album peaked on Billboard 200 at 115. It was number 18 on top rock albums. It was number 11 on alternative albums and number 4 on vinyl albums. It was also number 1 on Billboard's Tastemakers chart. The second video and single released was a song called Garden, and that's the one that we played at the opening of this segment. That was that's one of 2 tracks off this album that was written by Barlow instead of Mascis.
Garden, I think, is actually my favorite track on the record. It is a little wider in the chorus and a little sweeter. Nice pan guitars, and it's thick and it's sonically pleasing for me in the course of this record. There's a lot of songs on this record, and I think if you're a Dinosaur Jr. fan, there's a lot here for you to sink your teeth into. Personally, for me though, Garden was my favorite track.
Yeah. Well, another song that the band has been getting some critical attention on is I Ain't. It's the album opener, and I really think it kind of sets a tone for the whole record.
Yeah.
This is I Ain't. They're important pioneers and influencers of whether you call it lo-fi rock or indie
alternative.
indie alternative.
The early 90s,
It's a sound that came to dominate a lot of music in the 90s, really. And this is one of the pioneer bands of the entire alternative rock genre in general. And so I think this album really still has kind of that iconic early 90s feel to it.
Yeah.
These guys know who they are and what they should sound like, and they have a signature sound that they don't mess with.
I think one thing that's forgotten about with this band and some of the other bands from that time frame is they came up through college radio.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And that's really where it grew, and then started going to transfer it into more of a mainstream programming. But this was a very large college band, and that's where their following
their
developed.
base.
Yeah.
And all of that really seeded like the grunge explosion that ended up happening. It really did.
I think a lot of the bands, I don't think if you're not from Seattle, you're not a grunge band. I think literally
it has to.
That is where that came from.
A qualifying.
But I do think that a lot of those bands, ones that we were talking about earlier, were heavily influenced by this band.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we have this one in a limited edition translucent purple vinyl. We do not have many, so don't wait on this one. We also have Jay Mascis' solo release, Elastic Days.
1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, that the song I'm singing was an ocean nation, love will crave.
So on May 14th, David Gray released his 12th studio album. Got another 12th album here.
Yeah.
Just like Dinosaur
Yeah.
Jr. And it's called Skellig.
Two very similar bands.
It's on the label Laugh a Minute Records, which I believe is his own label that's partnering with AWOL for distribution. So let's talk for a minute about White Ladder and Babylon. That album was released on ATO Records in the year 2000. It was the same year that the label formed. And that label, as probably many of you know, was formed by Dave Matthews with his manager, Corin Capshaw. So David Gray was pulled into the U.S. market with a brand new label, and it really worked out well for both of them. ATO has proved itself to be one of the best labels really in the business. They remind me a lot of like Columbia Records, where you used to count on them to kind of have like commercial artists, but that was still like critically really respect, like your Bob Dylan's or your Johnny Cash's or, things like that. And I think ATO now is kind of been like that for indie rock artists. They're ones that kind of get a little more commercial, but they're critically really kind of respected. And I mean, you're talking about everyone from Alabama Shakes, the Black Pumas ended up going there last year. Brandy Carlisle's there, My Morning Jacket. So just, a lot of indie rock, some of them are Americana, alternative, and adult alternative artists. But that's kind of like ATO's wheelhouse. And David Gray popped there with White Ladder, and it really launched a new sound called Folktronic. And he saw his album go multi-platinum. It was number 35 on the Billboard 200. It was number 1 on the UK's OCC, and it charted really all over the world. It spent 176 weeks on the UK albums chart, making it the longest charting album in UK's history. It's still, I think to this day, the biggest selling album in Ireland's history. The album saw, David Gray, he was nominated for Best New Artist at the 44th Grammy Awards. So it just was like this huge, and the crazy thing was he originally released that album in 1998 in Ireland.
And it had some success there, but then
when ATO got it and it became this huge thing. And the single Babylon, which was the big song off that record, it went number 1 on AAA. It was number 8 on Top 40. In the UK, it went number 5 on the OCC singles chart.
Yeah.
So, that was kind of like his intro to the world, was that record. And since,
must be nice.
Since that time, he's consistently charted through the years at AAA radio, but he hasn't had a big single since around 2010. I think he had one moderately successful single in 2011. But, I mean, since that time, we just haven't seen much chart activity from him. His last album was in 2019. It was an album called Gold in the Brass Age, and it charted at 186 on the Billboard 200, and it was number 21 in the UK. It was number 8 on Americana folk charts, but that was basically it, and then it disappeared. He released one single to AAA, but it peaked at number 29. So again, we just haven't seen anything. It's almost like, I guess my point is like now we're at a point where we barely hear about Gray releasing new music.
Yeah. I feel like he's stayed popular overseas, but just
not
the
here,
same.
in the States, it's just kind of gotten to the point where I don't know what this album will do on its first week, since none of that's posted yet. But I personally think this is one of the best David Gray albums that I may have ever heard.
It's really good.
Yeah, the vocals are like really thick. They're layered and just lush. I mean, there's 6-part vocals. Just to let you know how kind of thick they are.
He definitely like focused on the vocals, in the recording process.
Yeah, I mean, this album is full of emotion. It reminds me more of like when I hear a really good Glenn Hansard album. Yeah. And the way that like he just takes something really like a really simple song, but he just still makes you feel so much. Like that is what this album is full of.
I got that vibe too, or like the Damian Rice, similar singer-songwriter.
Well, I think this really is an artist at the top of his craft, and I just find it ironic that it's when I haven't heard much about him over the last couple of years. One of the tracks that he released early had an accompanying video with it. It was a song called Heart and Soul. And I think it's an outstanding song off this record. Like this one, I think I don't know if they were going to release it to AAA, but I could hear this one totally working at that format. This is Heart and Soul.
For something and nothing, a voice in the air, Well, I'm hot and so bored, hot and so. Wonder shining in my eyes like I'm 3 years old. Not dead, only sleeping, adrift on the sea. The start of the river, the end of me. Well, I'm hot and so bored, hot and so. Glory shining in my eyes like I'm 3 years old. Shining in my eyes like I'm 3 years old.
I really think that would be a solid single if they released it.
Yeah, I read that he wouldn't really try to take any of these new songs to radio or anything. He said, I don't give a bollocks about chart positions or numbers or anything like that. He actually said, I don't give a bollocks.
Yeah.
I think sometimes artists they get to the top of their game when they're only making the music, for the craft, and they're not worried about label or radio, what the head of promotion thinks. And this song, Heart and Soul, is my favorite song on the record. It is, it's arranged really well. I really like the vocal production on it. It's got just a nice feel to it. And it's one of those songs that as soon as I listened to it, I put the little heart next to it on my Spotify and knew that I would want to be able to come back and listen to it again, just because I walked away with a feeling. And for me, that's always the key of any music. Did it make you feel something?
Yeah.
Did it drive some kind of emotion?
Well, the album was recorded at Edwin Collins' Helmsdale studio on the Sutherland coast of Scotland. And it captures kind of this sense of isolation, but also optimism with the melodies and harmonies that he does. And the reason I mention that is because this was all recorded pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
And he actually sought out a place that he could find a way to be completely isolated from culture and society. And he wanted to have that feeling, but that was all before he knew that we were all going to be forced into it.
Yeah, it was a weird little happening. Yeah, that happens before.
So he makes this album that kind of has this sense of that, but then he has all these like soaring harmonies and things that kind of make you just feel light and airy. And what ends up happening is, as we're coming out of COVID isolation ourselves, and also the fact that it's now we're in the season of spring. And I just think it's really, both in reality and metaphorically, like the hope this album kind of comes out being, it feels spring-like to me. Like it feels like a new chapter. I mean, this album to me, I was not prepared for what I just thought, well, let me check it out. It's a new David Gray album. And I was just completely surprised.
Different from what I expected, for sure, as well. And I think that he really captured that feeling of isolation, but like you want to be there. You want to be isolated.
Yeah. I think this whole album, to me, seems like a really good album for the times that we're in. And so I would definitely encourage everybody, if you haven't heard it, to just check this album out. It was produced by Ben DeVries. DeVries worked on Gray's last album, and he's really kind of known as a programming engineer, which to me is it's just a triumph for this album as well, because what they did is they eliminated most of the electronics and created a lot more, I guess, organic landscapes.
Kept it sparse.
Yeah.
Like with the instrumentation.
Vocals, piano, all this stuff. I mean,
strings.
More like string parts, layering the vocals to make the I mean, there's still some atmospheric stuff in here. He still
it's very
does some
atmospheric.
stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
But
More
way
stripped down than the
not what you would
Babylon.
consider electronic or the folktronic or any of that. Just all gone.
He creates the atmosphere without using the trickery,
a ton of extra,
the effects and stuff. It's more just the arrangements and the breathiness of the vocal and the lyric and the sparse instrumentation. But it's just all suitable.
Yeah,
it doesn't feel like it's missing anything. But I listen to this record and I go exactly mentally to the place that he went to make this record. It feels like you're in a little chateau or something on the coast in a gray Scotland and
on the cliffs of Scotland.
It's not a sunny day record, right?
Yeah. I think it's a beautiful album. Everyone should definitely check it out. We have it in a double vinyl pressing. We also have White Ladder in a limited edition white vinyl, and we also have this 2019 release gold in a brass age in 180 gram double vinyl.
You can get your David Gray fix here.
So check that out at the website. In September of 1992, White Lion released the band's first greatest hits compilation titled The Best of White Lion. The album was later reissued in 2006, and on May 7th of 2021, the band released this album on vinyl. I'm not sure if it's the first time it was ever on vinyl, but it definitely hasn't been on vinyl since 1992. And I doubt that if they did press it in 92, they pressed that many. Like they might have pressed it for Germany market or something like that, but there probably were not that many pressed at all. White Lion had a shorter run than many hair metal bands from the 80s. Like Poison, they really kind of took off late in the 80s, so they kind of caught the tail end of the whole hair metal movement.
It got into a muddied market, and they couldn't quite break with the other ones.
Yeah, well, 1987 is when they released their album Pride. And it's the band's multi-platinum album. It went 2 times platinum and produced 2 hit songs. The first was a song that we played in the intro of this segment called Wait. That song actually went to number 8 on the Hot 100 and number 18 on Mainstream Rock. It was also in pretty heavy rotation at MTV, which, we talked about this a little bit when we talked about Whitesnake. Just, really, that was when hair metal was kind of, especially on the ballad side, they were really pushing some of the hair metal stuff.
It was a very visual time for music with MTV, and White Lion broke, like you said, late in the game. It was another album produced by Mr. Michael Wagner, who worked with everybody back at that period of time. Everybody from Metallica, Poison, Ozzy, Doc, and Motley Crue, Skid Row. It just goes on and on. The band is really based on the talents of Mike Tramp, the vocals, and the guitar virtuoso Vito Barata. And Vito is very respected in the guitar world. He's a guy that, on his first record, all of a sudden you're seeing him on Guitar Player magazine, and he was a little bit of a virtuoso and had a little bit of a unique style. Michael Wagner said that he's one of his favorite guitar players out of all those that I just mentioned.
Right.
And people thought that there was a future. I wouldn't say this is a guy's band. I think this was very much a ballad hit band, and a lot of girls liked Mike Tramp and his blonde Bon Jovi-esque
That's right.
look to it.
Well, especially after the next single we're going to talk about.
Exactly.
So, the next single off the album to really pop was the band's biggest hit. It was the ballad When Children Cry.
You guys want me to sing a bar from that one? Or the
it
chorus?
went number 3 on the Hot 100. It was number 1 on the album Rock Tracks. It was number 4 on Cashbox. It was actually released to radio in 1988, and it was still on the Billboard's year-end chart on the Hot 100 in 1989 at number 60. So, it just hung out for a year.
Yeah, and it's I find that pretty amazing because it's almost a little bit of an odd vocal delivery on it and stuff, but it's the video was very popular at MTV, and it was because I think it was kind of touching and stuff. But this is another one of those bands that would release your opening hard rock track, and then you go to the power ballad. And that was the cycle, and that's the way you did things back then.
Yeah.
And they had success, and then the world changed, as we know.
Yep. Well, this is When the Children Cry.
Little child, dry your crying eyes. How can I explain the fear you feel inside? 'Cause you were born Just look what we have done. All that we destroyed, you must build again. When the children cry, let them know we tried. 'Cause when the children sing, then the new world begins.
So just like Poison, their smash hit came off this ballad at the end of the 80s. And they find themselves kind of starting the 90s in the musical landscape. You know, as you just kind of mentioned, everything was about to change. And you've got Nirvana and even bands like Dinosaur Jr., which we talked about, you know, at the opening of the show, Pearl Jam, all these bands that are coming in, and the radio landscape is completely different.
Overnight.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know that we'll ever see a change that drastic again. It went from where everything is just more bombs, more clothes, more, you know, sex, drugs, rock and roll, everything in that 80s, right? That
Excess.
Ronald Reagan excess period of time. And then almost overnight, it went from that is not as cool as Nirvana or something else. It's like that's the antithesis
Yes.
of what is cool. So you
Yeah.
went from being great and being a number one priority at a record company and radio stations to being something that they don't even want to hear from you again overnight. It was a fantastic change.
Yeah.
Well, they released an album in 1989 titled Big Game that had a moderately successful single. It was titled Little Fighter. It peaked at number 12 on mainstream rock. They also covered Golden Earrings, Radar Love on that album. That album was certified gold, so it's kind of their last one that actually sold at that level, where it was even certified. Then in 1991, they released Main Attraction. It had the song Love Don't Come Easy, and that went number 24 on mainstream rock. And then this is when they meet the full grunge explosion. That's it. It's over.
And keep in mind that at that period of time when grunge was hitting, that was alternative radio.
Right.
It was
Yeah.
not mainstream
Yeah.
radio. So, and that's when that format took over.
Yeah. Well, while this is a quick run, you know, the band still made, you know, one of the kind of the last legitimate metal impacts of, you know, at least, especially if you talk about hair metal at that stage of rock, they're one of the last ones. This compilation pulls from all three of the albums that we mentioned. It also has a couple of live tracks on the album. So, you know, this is a good comprehensive collection for White Lion. If you don't want to go back and buy everything.
if you're a
like
white
this is-
if you're
yeah.
a White Lion fan, Rhino always does these packages really well.
Yeah.
And they did another good job on this record.
Well, we have this one in a limited edition, 180 gram purple vinyl. We also have the band's 1985 debut release, Fight to Survive, which we didn't even talk about, but it's the first time it's ever been on vinyl, and we have that one in the store as well.
When the moonlight hits the water, the reflection hits your eyes. I can't take it any longer, and this rope is pulling tight. Be my anchor, pull me under in this river here tonight. 'Cause I can't breathe when I'm with you. When I'm with you, I can fly.
So on May 7th, the Marfa Tapes was released on RCA Nashville. You know, this is a collaboration between Maranda Lambert, Jack Ingram, and John Randall. It's a very unique project.
Yeah.
It's almost like hearing demos, but I really think it's a lot more than that.
Absolutely. These are like some of the biggest songwriters in Nashville, you know, along with
Yeah.
Maranda Lambert.
Well, these three singer-songwriters have been meeting in the West Texas town of Marfa for several years to write together. They would literally sit around a campfire in the desert and write songs. And that's actually what this album is. Almost all 15 of the tracks were recorded outdoors around a fire. All three of them sing into one microphone.
Yeah.
You can hear the wind blow occasionally, or a firecracker crackle. I mean, you can even hear a cow. The highway sounds. I think there's a helicopter at one part. Kevin, you mentioned like creaking chairs.
Creaking chairs, or when they're on the tailgate and stuff. It's a beautiful piece of work. Some of that stuff can be maybe a little distracting if you're not in the moment with the thing. So if you're looking for a record that sounds like a normal record, you're going to be surprised, because this really is like, he just puts you there. If you were there with these people around a campfire on the back of a pickup truck and they're playing some songs, that's what this is.
And
really
the thing
pure.
to kind of keep in perspective, like I hear demos all the time, and usually when you get a demo, you're really excited about the prospects of actually making it a full blown, produced master.
Yeah.
There's just something special about these songs, and the way that they did it captured that Western songs, like sung out West, like the way that you would picture like ranchers or cowhands, after a long day sitting around singing, passing a guitar and singing these songs like that. So I think they did a great job at making this feel like that kind of moment.
Yeah.
One of the first songs that they released is a song called "In His Arms." This is a really great example of the whole album and kind of that emotion that goes behind it, and even that kind of imagery that I just was saying, like you're going to get a sense of all that even from this one song.
Yeah.
And here's the truth. Like I literally have no desire to hear fully produced versions of this song after hearing this.
Yeah. I think they sound great.
Yeah.
Stand up on their own. The stripped down feeling is like perfect for this record.
Well, as long as records have been being made, to come up with a new, totally novel approach, something that you just never heard before. I've never heard anything like this before from major artists and songwriters, to be able just to do something so simple. It's another product, I'm sure, of COVID.
Yeah.
Right.
And one of the good things that have come out of it. But it's just something brand new as far as this type of release.
Yeah.
Well, let's see if you feel the same way when you guys hear it. This is "In His Arms."
I've seen El Paso when the sky was on fire. Lost a night in Juarez a couple of times. Danced with a cowboy on a straight tequila high. I wish I was in his arms tonight. I've been a rolling stone, a tumbleweed, waiting for the right one to come find me. But the wrong one always set me free. I wish I was in his arms tonight. Is he playing in some house band in Dallas? Is he breaking horses in San Antonio? Is he all alone in the neon lights? I wish I was in his arms tonight.
So these three songwriters really have a great history together. Randall produced both of Ingram's last two albums. Randall and Ingram co-wrote with Maranda Lambert, Tin Man,
Her
which
2016 album.
Yeah, which that song, is on this album, the way that they're doing these. But that was obviously a huge hit for her in 2018. It won Song of the Year at the ACMs, and it was nominated for Best Country Song at the Grammys. And it also was nominated for Song of the Year at the CMAs. So, Lambert, just as an artist, Lambert won 3 Grammys and 29 ACMs and 14 CMAs. So
Wow.
definitely like probably one of the most recognized women in modern country music.
Yep.
Randall, has cuts with literally everyone in country music. Like, there's no point in even starting to list them because
Yeah,
it's
too
probably
long.
everybody. I think he may be the only songwriter that could check off, I've written with everybody.
He's written with everybody and still doesn't have a Grammy to show for it. It's really annoying.
Well, and Ingram, he's a Texas legend. He's had multiple hit country songs, one number one, but just very respected. And so, these guys go to Texas to write these together. They are on their own. They all have really huge track records. And it just was really interesting to be able to kind of like have the curtain pulled back and let you just see this process that the three of them have kind of been doing as they've enjoyed creating together for years.
Yep.
And a lot of times, the only time you see the result is something like Tin Man when it is out in its fully produced version, and you're kind of just associating it with, only with Lambert, and she's winning awards for it, and you're not, necessarily thinking like this is probably how this song started.
Yeah.
It's a powerhouse writing team. I'm sure they could produce any of these songs into big industry hits. Some of them, as we just mentioned, have been. But listening to them like this, it just feels really good. And I think it should serve as a reminder to anyone, why people get into songwriting in the first place. It's raw, it's lo-fi, it's authentic.
It's going to sound great on vinyl.
Yeah, it's absolutely a perfect thing to have on vinyl, and I found it to be extremely enjoyable. We have this in a double vinyl pressing, so that is the Marfa Tapes. So if you're interested in that, head to the website and you can grab that record.
We also have Maranda Lambert's Wild Card on a limited edition 140 gram clear and red double LP.
Oh yeah, that's
grab
right.
that.
On April 16th, Greta Van Fleet released the band's second studio album, The Battle at Garden's Gate, on Lava and Republic Records. The band's first album, Anthem of the Peaceful Army, was released in 2018, and it debuted at number 3 on Billboard. We had the band in our Discover program at B.T.R.C, which is, we don't really have that category anymore.
Yeah.
But we had that in 2018. The band had radio singles that crossed over from rock to AAA and alternative. So they really kind of made a splash like right out the gate.
Yeah.
And even before that, they had an EP called From the Fires.
Yep.
That had the band's first hit, Highway Tune. And they were actually nominated for 3 Grammys and won Best Rock Album in 2018 at the 61st Grammys off that EP.
It's like they just show up and boom, Grammy, done.
The band is heavily influenced by 70s rock.
You might notice that.
So much so that it's, that the band has faced a lot of pushback on their similarity of their sound specifically to Led Zeppelin. But, Kevin, I remember in the late 80s when Kingdom Come came out and started to blow up at MTV and had the radio hit Get It On, and that was 1988, and they faced huge backlash as well. Even from I think Jimmy Page even made a comment about them.
Was there another band that kind of did the...
So I'm going to tell you a very quick story.
Yeah.
Dave Lonco, who we all know, was working at that label. And they said, what we need is we need a Led Zeppelin. And there was no Led Zeppelin working at the time. And they took that and put that together and put that out. And everybody's like, there's no way it was going to work. And it just took off. Mm-hmm. One song, one album, I think, maybe 2 records.
They had a few records.
But that's the only thing that worked.
One hit.
But the fact is that there is a particular spot that needs to be filled. And sometimes when a band has gone away, either through fate or they've just disbanded, there's a hole and people want to hear it. And different generations don't. There's the generation that's coming today very well may not be familiar with Led Zeppelin. So let's get this out of the way real quick. This band is so comparison to Led Zeppelin that you've got it's so close in so many ways, and the band will acknowledge it in many ways as well, that you've got haters and lovers, right, that deal with this. It's a controversial band at this point because of the comparison.
And I think they're not having to face it as much as like Kingdom Come did. I mean, it got so bad for Kingdom Come. I mean, a lot of people started calling them Kingdom Clone. But the thing is, with that one, the lead singer legitimately sounded so close to Robert Plant. You literally for a moment you were like transported back to Led Zeppelin. So there's that difference, but it's also like we're a lot further away from Led Zeppelin. To your point, there's probably people out there that aren't as familiar. It's going to be tougher for the people that grew up listening to Led Zeppelin. That's where I think the breakdown.
Exactly, and I think the difference between this band, the biggest difference between this band and Zeppelin is the drumming, where you don't have that in the mix where Bonham was so present, right, and was such a powerful drummer. These kids are young, and they're
a lot of time to grow.
They still have a lot of time to grow. They haven't mastered their instruments yet, and you just don't hear that thunder from the drums that you hear on Zeppelin records. But that's not a cut against
a slide
against
against
drummer or anything. You're talking Bonham is probably the most respected rock drummer in the history of rock music. So I think that's the difference, though, as far as out of these things.
Like you said, it is going to be tough for some people to get past some of these comparisons and influences. But I think it is hard because nobody wants to hear a ripoff, and it's hard to hear something that you feel, like you said, like it's like a line that you don't even know how to define, where it crosses over like that's too close versus. And I don't know where Greta Van Fleet sits. I know that. Like I enjoy 70s rock so much that it was kind of refreshing to hear hear it from a new generation. And I do think, is to your point of their age, I think it's probably, there's not a lot of other bands that take up that sound right now. And so, in some ways it is fresh. It really is done so well. It's hard for me to be a hater anyway, because it is done really well. This album is produced phenomenal. The Battle at Garden's Gate debuted at number 7 on Billboard 200. It was number 1 on both the hard rock and rock albums chart. It was number 8 on the UK's OCC. The song we played at the opening was a song called My Way Soon. That song peaked at number 3 on hard rock songs. It was number 7 on rock and alternative and number 1 on mainstream rock. The second single released is a song called Heat Above. That song peaked at number 1 on hard rock songs. It's currently at number 26 on rock and alternative, and it went number 11 on mainstream rock. So this is Heat Above.
So the intro for this song sounds like we're going to church, rock and roll church, but it is. This is a good example of a Greta Van Fleet song, right? A soaring vocal. This one, they bring in the B.T.R.C, which is also similar to the style Led Zeppelin used to do, where they have the bass player play the organ versus the bass on it. But it's a great song. This album is produced so well, and the sounds, the tones, everything. I mean, this was not an inexpensive record, I'm sure. And you got, with Greg producing. And
Greg Kirsten is the producer.
Right, and Greg's done everything from Adele to Foo Fighters to Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
So it's done really well. And Jason Flom, who signed the band and is the owner of Lava, is this very passionate about this act and has put this as a priority. And I think it's obvious to the success that the band's had.
Yeah. So Kirsten is an interesting pick for production on this. The Foo Fighters is the obvious comparison to me.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as like I could see that and then picture him, producing Greta Van Fleet.
But like a lot of pop.
He's done a lot of pop,
field.
and he's also, we talked about him. We had I can't remember what we were covering it for, but it was Maggie Rogers' record a couple seasons ago.
Yeah.
And it was I Heard It in a Past Life, and he produced that. And one of the things that you kind of note about him is he's often brought in by labels to do like one or two, like the single, and he'll, especially with like a lot of the pop groups. But then with bands like Foo Fighters, he'll end up doing most of the album, if not all of it. And obviously that's the case here. And I think when the record like he produced for Foo Fighters is Concrete and Gold. And I really do think if you kind of listen to that, you're going to hear that same production level. But I mean, for a band that's on their second record and they're getting produced at the same level as Foo Fighters, it's pretty amazing.
Concrete and Gold is a great record.
Yeah.
Kirsten's literally worked. I mean, even whether if you're talking about just the songs or the whole albums, it's so many artists. I mean, and it ranges from like your pop and pop country, like your Kelly Clarkson, all the way to like things like Beck.
Alternative rock.
I mean, he's even got he did one of I think it might be the single for the new 21's Pilots album that's not even out yet. So I mean, like he runs the gambit. But again, it's all like commercial grade stuff, really, really high level production, probably high budgets. The result is very much like that Foo Fighters record. You've got a solid rock record that, kind of checks all the boxes that you want to hear.
And what a difference
standpoint.
from approach from the Miranda record or even the Dinosaur Jr. record.
Right.
Yeah.
That was so stripped down and very inexpensive, I'm sure, and stuff compared to this, which is going back in and going to 4 or 5 different studios in LA and going through the whole process. I mean, we've been there, and
they even
we all
recorded
know how
some
much
of
that
this
costs.
record here in Nashville. So
at the end,
multiple studios all over the
yeah.
States.
Yeah.
Well, and like you said, it is packaged beautifully. I mean, it really is. And it's a double vinyl. And this is one of those bands, too, that once they come out on vinyl, they sell through so quick, it's going to be tough to find in a couple of months. We have this one available now. We also have a couple of their, I think we have the EP and we have the last album still, but we don't have many left of either one of those.
Yeah. And if you're tired of going to your local store, most of them are very small. The stock is very limited, and you go there and you just can't find what you need. Come to Blind Tiger, get your subscription or do some solo shopping and have it just dropped right to your door. And one of the great things about vinyl is the packaging, and you get to really, you hold the record, you see what the artist wants you to see. You get to go into all the imaging, all the artwork that we all lost when everything went to CD and everything became so small. And or just a little icon
or streaming.
iTunes.
We just lost it all together. So
exactly. So let us just ship this right to your door and enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, we hope you have enjoyed our discussion on the May Spotlight album and some of our new store additions for the month from the Blind Tiger Record Club. Some other titles that we just added included Rag and Bone Man's new release, Life by Misadventure. The British singer-songwriter recorded this album with Grammy-winning producer Mike Elanzado. He's worked with Eminem, Fiona Apple, Alanis Morissette. Another band from the UK, the Scottish alternative band Teenage Fan Club, released Endless Arcade this year. It's another solid release from that band. It's the first release since their 2016 highly acclaimed album Here. We also have a new Grammy recipient, Phoebe Bridgers' album called Copycat Killer. She released this. It's really an EP, and it has new versions of songs that appeared on the Grammy-winning album Punisher. But they are orchestral arrangements, and they're just much, much different from the original release. Also, this weekend, we will be releasing the B.T.R.C. Killers Ultimate Collector Series. This series includes all the band's studio albums, plus a compilation called Sawdust. That consists of B-sides, covers, and other rarities. It's a great collector series. If you want to go to the website, you will see collector series in the drop-down menu. There's so many great collections available there. They're all curated by B.T.R.C, and many of them are hard to collect if you try to buy them separately. If you want to find out more about any of these albums that we discussed or mentioned tonight, head to blindtigerrecordclub.com, and you can read more about any and all the records that we talked about on this show. You can also learn how to become a member. One of the biggest perks to membership is that you don't miss out on these albums. So many sell out on release day or by the end of release week. And with a club membership, you secure your copy every month. You also get emails and new release notices sent to you that help you stay in the know on what's available, new, and usually rare. Members get their vinyl shipped free, so it's really a great way to keep from missing out on the vinyl that you really want to get. If you sign up for a membership at Blind Tiger Record Club, you can actually start with one of the albums that we introduced on the last show. After that, you get vinyl like that delivered to your door every month. So head to the site and take a look at the records of the month for May, and then pick one and start your membership today. Our next episode is May 31st, so mark your calendar, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, right after the 615. We will be discussing the June records of the month. Please follow the podcast, like us, leave reviews and comments, tell your friends about the show, email Lightning100. Stay up to date on all that we're doing by signing up for our email list at the website. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook. We're going to be doing some giveaways this season. We'll probably start those on the next show, so make sure that you plug in somewhere and follow us. But most importantly, keep coming back. Lastly, thank you to Lightning 100 for always supporting local art and events and even shows like ours. On behalf of Kevin Lee and Rudy Newman, I'm David Williams, and until next time, keep the wax spinning.